All right, we have a first question here from our very own real bacteria. Do you think when any-to-any is made available, it will undermine some tokens' efforts to have a use case? In other words, do you anticipate any pushback for using the Mattr One protocol for projects whose whole token utility is to be the token used for payments on their own platform? Like there are like some cases like this where like a token is sort of like the intermediary for like these kinds of utilities on their own platform.
Well, I mean, I would need more context, maybe some hard examples. But what
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, and that's probably a similar kind of situation. I was having a conversation a couple days ago with an EVM L1, which it's quite well known, and they're looking to make their ecosystem more interoperable and etc. The classic approach and growth strategies, and they obviously have a gas token, just like BNB or Matic or Phantom, whatnot. And it took them a little while to really understand kind of what we were doing and how it would essentially materialize itself in the context of, of, of abstracting multiple steps and elements, including their token. And I was saying, like, to transact in your ecosystem in your L1, if your chain is brought in and as part of the interchain payment system, then people would not need to buy this token, this gas token. And it took a while for her to understand that whole thing. But ultimately, I think sort of the side answer to this is the whole point is to abstract it from the end user, from needing it. Because ultimately the buyer or the consumer or the person that does the trade effectively only needs to hold this gas token for a fraction of a second. So it's a pretty big ask to effectively having to go through all those hoops and loops to basically buy this asset so they can effectively do the next step. But the payment system, the way it works, it's not abstracting that step. If it is a requirement to use that token in the process of payment, then it's actually still doing it, but the end user is not interacting with it. So I don't know if this kind of answers the questions indirectly, but whichever token that's part of a gaming ecosystem or anything like it as ultimately a utility token or whatever, then it's kind of the same thought as NFTs. If the NFT can only be bought, that collection can only be bought by its paired token, we can't jump that step. It's not possible. Just like Embr, it's not possible to buy it with anything else, technically. But when you do same chain swap, or from another chain swap, ultimately at the end of the day, the currency that needs to be swapped for Embr is BNB. There's just no other choice. So this is kind of what is called multi-hops. So when you look on BSC scan, what actually happens, let's say in our case, if someone wants to buy BNB, wants to buy Embr, but is coming from another chain, the destination chain where the transaction will happen to acquire Embr, there will be an initial swap of USDC for BNB, and then BNB will be effectively swapped for Embr, and then Embr will be sent in the same transaction to the buyer. So there's no way of removing kind of this. So these are kind of called multi-hops, but at the end of the day, the goal is to abstract that from the transaction and the UX. Now it creates this whole kind of other incentive, or at least this narrative will need to be reinforced more, because if now people, let's say before, used to have to buy a gas token to transact, the reason why they were holding it is not because they believe or they actually look forward to that asset to gaining value or anything like it. They hold it because they have to. But if they don't have to hold it anymore, then you have to start building a true strong narrative on why would people hold your asset if they don't need it for trading. So that's a whole other topic. So if that asset, its sole purpose is effectively to serve in the context of a transaction, then there, at least, in the UI and in the various, applications and marketplaces that have integrated with, our interchain payment system, that will no longer be something, will no longer be a thing, this type of requirement. It's not stopping the volume and the trade of that asset, but it'll be from a buy and basically sell in a fraction of a second. So now the narrative is, why hold this asset? So it's really about, at that moment now, the narrative is, can there be value driven if people aren't really holding this asset? Now it creates new economics that even chains have to think about.
I think it's safe to say that this kind of thing will likely ruffle feathers, not just
Yeah,
not just
absolutely. And
projects.
that's what I said to the chain. Ultimately at the end, she really got it, and she was like, "Holy shit, this is really novel. Like, it changes. Like, I haven't seen anything like it, out there." And they were on this spree of making kind of their gas token available on all the centralized exchange and spending big money. And it was like, and they were setting up their first DEX and their first stable coin. And their whole game plan was like, let's try to make sure this gas token is available everywhere so that people can buy it, so that people can trade on our chain. And I was like, unfortunately, I think there's no use case for that. And of course, our narrative needs to play out. But if it does play out, I don't see the use from an end user perspective in the context of a transaction for them to have accessibility to it. There is no point. Nobody's going to buy it. Like, especially if it's not stable. Like, why would I buy it? Like, makes no sense. Anyway, it's just me. I don't know if anybody else shares that thought, but she looked concerned, to say the least.
She won't be the only one, that's for sure. Moving along, thank you for that question, Back. I think this is also from Back as well. Actually, yeah, let's do one more here. These are some good questions. How will the returns on liquidity staking be guaranteed? Is it from revenue? Like, where will that, how will the liquidity staking work in terms of like the returns for the people who are actually staking?
So returns are calculated by, based on an APY, and there are a lot of variables. I mean, the return is not guaranteed, it's dynamic. We're running a bunch of different models, but there are a lot of variables. Very hard to say what amount that amount will be in terms of percentage. But if we look at, from a macro perspective, the actual demand and supply for stable coins, if you look out there, there is a strong demand for stable coins. Freely available stable coins out there, there is a need for them in protocols. So they are in high demand. That means not only in protocols, but also in DeFi services with regards to, let's say, lending and borrowing, because others need them. So it creates a lot of pressure on stables. And right now you're looking at pretty wild APYs out there, from a an average of 15 and upwards in terms of potential interests. So it's definitely a very and highly competitive landscape. So we take that into consideration to make it, an attractive product.
And also, kind of a nice question that's so sort of tangentially related from Bouncer. The question about liquidity staking is interesting. I'm a bit worried about whether the revenue share will go into the LP staking reward, and would the staking, liquid staking, decrease the value of the token and decrease the attractivity of the token? Is there like a trade-off there between liquidity staking and the Embr token?
I don't think so. I don't see much correlation, to be honest. I mean, people wanting to supply liquidity, I mean, as much as, at the end of the day, it's really what's in, and, it all boils down to what's in it for them. So the initial value proposition has to be incentive based. So for them, it's like, hey, I got this asset. I want to put it to work, and I'm going to choose the place that gives me kind of the best yield. That's basically why yields move, like stakers move all the time. They're just chasing the next best yield. And then now with the whole restaking landscape, they're basically double compounding on this underlying asset that's working, and then they're restaking it somewhere else for it to work again. And with regards, I mean, that needs to be incentivized, and that's a specific split for that. With regards to the Embr token has its own proposition. I know that the general crowd here is interested in the revenue split, but not everyone will hold Embr for that. Like, this is not going to be like, I understand it. It is an important, unique value proposition, but the token needs to be multifaceted, and it needs to basically appeal to a broad range of people. So what I mean by this is, like, it'll be pretty, like, there will be a lot of reasons why the Embr token will be attractive, not just for that. So, and if you're interested in that, then you get all the rest. So it's kind of this thing where it's always a win-win. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure if I answered the question accordingly, but I don't see the liquidity provisioning in the payment system to be kind of having a negative impact on the token.
Yeah, I think that's mostly. I think he did a good job answering that. Yeah, especially as the community might not know all the details yet, so it's good to get that out there, that there won't be like a direct trade-off there. So the next question: how are Checkout v3 tests running? Is it public on any project websites already? So basically,
So let's rewind. So Checkout v3 is essentially a pretty big overhaul of Checkout per se. So without going into all the various features of v3, I think it's fair to say that, and yeah, I don't know if there is a rumor that v3 is out there or anything like it. I mean, from my observation on how the team has been answering, and Ben sharing in various huddles and voice chats, like, we haven't said that there's any out there, and we haven't said that it's a product that's ready. So it's not out there for sure, so it's not being tested either. There are many things that need to be shipped prior, so dependencies. Right now, the sole focus is the API and getting that out into production, and then we will start working on checkout. We are indeed internally looking at various UI and integrating a bunch of features that weren't there before, but ultimately, the major differentiator, or at least the major kind of feature difference of that checkout is blurring the lines between fiat and crypto in terms of payment. Because everywhere else you go, this is a two kind of flow UX. So yeah, and also, it's yeah. There's a bunch of other things that we're working on. Yeah, that's all.
Safe to say, yeah.
But the direct answer is not being tested, no feedback.
It is safe to say there will be lots of excitement before Checkout V3 gets more, public news and updates. That's for sure. So you can count on that. And kind of moving along, you're gonna love this one, Jason. What are your personal expectations for Paris Blockchain Week? Where do you see yourself in the competition? And what are these other meetups in Paris that Jason mentioned, if we're able to talk about them?
Well, I mean, it is a networking event first and foremost. So I'm attending, let's say, because I'm also going somewhere else prior internationally at an event where I am speaking in front of about 600 people. And when I land into Paris, there's a big private circle event that I've been invited to attend. So I'm going there. And then just a bunch of people I never met in real life. So meeting a few partners, a couple handshakes that are going to be important. If I do make it in the top 10, if we make it in the top 10 for the competition, then I think that's on the third day. There's going to be a pitch. But for me, it's really about making connections and shaking hands. So I also I bought this DJI Mic 2, the new thing. It's like a big AirPod case, basically, black thing with two mics in it. And so I intend on doing a few kind of off the fly interviews and have conversation with a few people for the podcast. So maybe create some form of mashup and for the event. I'm not sure, maybe do some spaces. I'm just going to wing it. So I'll see. You still there then? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Sorry, I was just responding to an answer. There was like a little comment in Telegram about Checkout a little while ago. I just said, things can change a little bit. It's kind of why we're a little hesitant to give timelines sometimes in that regard. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. Give me a quick second to pull it up. The revenue share, as the white paper mentioned, would be the last phase, or phase 6. You mentioned revenue share will come this year if everything goes right. Does that mean that any other phase will be done too, or did you switch up the order? Or are we switching up the order?
Well, I don't remember by heart the 5 steps prior to step 6, but it's probably fair to say that we will be very, very close to accomplishing at least everything that we sought to achieve from a fundamentals perspective with regards to the white paper. So, like, without giving any dates, I get a very strong feeling that by end of the year, a lot of everything that we set out to achieve will have at least a V1 out there. So
Yeah.
I guess if this encompasses kind of the 5 steps, then we'll probably be close, if not, already have some propositions out there with regards to the revenue share. But let's also remember that, and this will probably come out fairly shortly. I know Curtis has been promising, but I'm kind of the bottleneck here with regards to like his roadmap that he wants to share with you guys, because I think there's a lot more work to be done and enlightening a bunch of areas of work. But these are not necessarily just things that we may just exclusively decide. There's some key steps in that sort of governance and DAO roadmap that include, the token. So there's going to be a bunch of things in there that will clarify kind of the token's role and utility and value proposition within this whole payment ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that, the order of those token utilities, may not 100% follow the exact layout that they appear there. But yeah, I think that's just worth mentioning as well that, the exact order might not look precisely as it appears there as well. But moving along. All right. Actually, I already did that one. When the Mattr One Protocol, or at least in this case, the SmartSwap API, is implemented by an on-ramp, does it essentially gain the volume of all of that on-ramp's transactions?
So the way it works, and we're probably going to be doing a demo in the next couple of weeks anyway, as we get into production. I think we're probably a week or two to be able to do a demo with the community. So the way it works, and there'll be more details on this in the demo, but maybe the easiest way of explaining this is when you go to an on-ramp website and you click on what you want to buy, that you want to pay with fiat, there's a list of assets that appears there. So that list of assets is sort of an aggregation of various provenance. As an end user, you don't see this because it's just showing what you can buy. But I'll give you an example. If you go in a shop and you see all these products on the shelf, it's safe to assume that the products that you see on those shelves, they're not coming all from the same vendor. It's probably safe to say that, the shop has various suppliers for all of these. But you as a user, a consumer walking in the shop, you're getting a one-stop experience. You're like in this shop and you see all of the various products up for sale. So a ramp is a bit like that. 100%, I'd say near 100% of the ramps that exist out there, they outsource these assets that you see in the UI from someone else. So these are liquidity providers, and generally speaking, these assets are sourced from custodial locations like a centralized exchange or a private market maker, etc. So there's various vendors of those. So when you see that list, it's fair to assume that even though you don't know, these assets are coming from various locations. Whoever has the best price, the best relationship, as any business, that's how you do stuff. Now, how we fall into this is we become a new vendor for them. We become a new vendor for all the assets that they're currently buying from someone else. Now, the initial value proposition is not a value proposition to save money or to be competitive with what they already can get. The initial value proposition is to expand their list of supported asset with things that their vendor cannot supply. So if you go back to the shop and the store, imagine a shop that has a few suppliers, and basically all of these suppliers supply the same thing. They supply the 60 or 70 same products. But every single day you get people coming in this shop and they're like, hey, do you have this new product? And be like, no, but do you want it? And they're like, yeah, I want it. Can't sell it to you. I'll check with my vendor and be like, can we just bulk buy wholesale that token? And unfortunately we can't. That's what we got. So then, the shop owner is like, well, you can't sell that token. But now it just changes this dynamic. These 10, 20, 30 different shops, now they have access to this new supplier. It's a wholesale guy, and he comes in and he's like, hey, you know what? This guy and that guy and this guy, when they came in and they said, I want this and I want that, now you can offer it to them. So it's more a proposition of expanding their stock supply and diversify it. And then at some point, they might consider potentially changing suppliers of assets they already kind of support from a pricing perspective. So it's going to be more that kind of thing. So that's the long way of answering your question of, well, technically, no. I mean, we don't take over, if a new product now lands, if a shop gets a new supplier for one product they put on the shelf, they don't gain all the business, of that shop. They just get what they sell. That's it.
Especially as our functionalities increase, it's probably safe to think that over time our ability to influence different items in that shop might increase as well. But yeah, it seems at least.
But what I can tell you is if you compare asset for asset from a price point perspective, and there's more to it other than that, there's a strong value proposition to not rely on custodial assets. I mean, settlement time will be much faster when they press buy to get the asset versus having to go and acquire the asset and going through that whole process. And then second, you always get best price on chain. The infrastructure cost of sourcing on chain directly through our API is much less intensive from an engineering perspective. Really plug and play. So there are reasons, there are more reasons than the ones I just laid out, but it's clearly an evolving space, and especially us as a new vendor coming in, creating new dynamics and new opportunities. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Good question. And there is a good one. I'll save that just for a little bit later because I think that's a good question to kind of get to end on. When can I buy Solana shitcoins through our API to make some gains and buy more Embr? Smirk. Thank you.
I wonder where he got this idea. So the theory and the fundamentals are being worked on right now in terms of we have all the components to actually do this, and we're looking at in the next couple of weeks to prove those fundamentals. It's not going to be a product in production for now, but I think, and the reason behind this is I think we've been talking a lot. We know we can do it, but nothing beats kind of a demo. Nothing beats that, that can show that you can. And the reason why I put this out in the wild today is because we were discussing this yesterday and today. And I mean, yeah, it's possible, and it's going to be possible. It's actually not that complicated. Well, not complicated. I mean, the fundamentals are not complicated. It requires a lot of moving parts, but it's actually pretty straightforward, and it'll be blazing fast. Blazing fast meaning like 5 seconds, and cost basically the swap, like 2 same chain swaps costs in terms of gas plus the protocol fee, but that's going to be hell cheap. So compare that to your best performing bridge. I mean, there's no competition.
I'm looking forward to that day. I certainly am. The beautiful part is the Mattr One Protocol, again, in theory, has the ability to bring together EVM and non-EVM chains. But being that we originate from EVM, it will definitely take a little bit more doing to link in a non-EVM chain than it would be for us to link in an EVM chain, earlier on.
Actually, not really. Not really. It's well, yes and no. I mean, that's a reason why we're looking for a Solana dev, but
yeah,
I mean, it's the same thing. Like, the only reason why we have this, why we're advanced in the EVM ecosystem is because we've written all those contracts already. I mean, if we would have spent all our time on Solana, we'd be at the same place. Well, probably not. Be probably faster because it's just a single ecosystem. There's not multiple chain, multiple decks. I mean, it's just a few and real simple. But yeah, it's not a lot of work. It's just that it's not a priority right now because there's other moving parts and other dependencies. It's just really a question of time.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to go ahead and encourage. Yeah, so Back has a question. I did skip over it originally just because I didn't want to answer three from the same person at the same time. But since we've gone through the other ones, how many blockchains will be supported initially when we started, when we bring this to market?
Good question. So again, going back to data and demand, you can do a few searches out there and you'll be able to see that if you search pathways, so which pathways are in the highest demand in terms of moving value between blockchain ecosystems. And the three that stand out right now in terms of feasibility, I mean, there's probably a bunch of other pathways. If they were available, then they probably have high demand. But the three pathways are kind of this golden triangle between ETH, Polygon, and BNB. That's kind of the golden triangle right now in terms of highest demand and that you can see numbers. So we'll definitely start on mainnet Polygon, and shortly after, or probably at the same time, we'll get BNB chain. Right now, we're more kind of focusing and establishing various replenishment models and fallback kind of scenarios with regards to liquidity, so that whenever, let's say, one vault falls out of balance in terms of the spectrum that it's required to hold, i.e., let's say each vault is meant to have $100,000 in it, we will give it a spectrum, which could be from 60,000 to 140,000. And that vault is effectively able to move freely between that kind of spectrum. If there's, if there's, and then you have to understand the dynamics, but I'm not going to dive into it too much, but I assume you know how it works. But there's if there's some credits, because each vault gets requested to do debits and credits. If I'm coming from BNB and I'm doing I'm using a BNB chain in the context of payments, what happens is that token is being sold against a stablecoin, USDC, and that creates a debit transaction. So it's a plus in the vault. So that gets it closer to the top range. But if on a day that there is a lot of demand, let's say hypothetically on the base chain, and people are paying from BNB to buy whatever on base chain, that means that 100K kind of 60 to 140 means that there's a lot of buy pressure in there. It means credits, minuses, and there's a lot of debits happening in BNB chain because people are essentially selling on the source chain. It gets deposited in USDC, so USDC balance goes up, but there's a high pressure on base to use USDC in it, so it goes down. So there's kind of this rebalancing act that needs to happen. So we're effectively trying to optimize proactively as much as possible the replenishment of this from various locations and fallback mechanism. If one pathway is bottlenecked or whatever, we need to fall back on something else so that the system remains real time. Because if it hits the bottleneck, worst thing that will happen is that a transaction will basically go into the queue system and be executed as soon as there's sufficient amount of liquidity in the protocol to execute this transaction. So this is where ultimately at scale, when you run various scenarios, it becomes very, very complicated to predict the amount of liquidity needed in the protocol at various or at any given moment. And those variables include replenishment time, include blockchain confirmation, include the level and the level of real time execution of that protocol. So there is an incredible amount of variable to be able to identify the amount of liquidity that we need. And also, weirdly enough, the whole objective of this system is to run on the least amount of cash. I mean, as we optimize, as things go faster, etc., we will need less and less amount of liquidity, or maybe more. I don't know. But theoretically, as things get better and faster, you would need less liquidity per vault on each chain. So there's this big kind of question that we have is, what is this magic number? Because once you identify this magic number, then you can project what is needed to expand on another chain in terms of liquidity. Once we know this number, it'll be easy to say, okay, it's not just about dropping like one of those anchors, which is our kind of smart contract that includes the router and the vault. Like that is useless if there's no money in the vault. But how much money should there be in the vault? So it's kind of all these questions that we have to answer theoretically through simulations and things like that. But once we figure it out, what's really exciting about it is that that number basically gets recycled how many times a day? Because your system is super effective, but if it replenishes itself, and for every credit there's a debit, the system is always balanced per se in terms of accounting. It just needs to rebalance itself from a liquidity perspective. So, and I'll go a little bit further in explaining this if you haven't kind of came up to that conclusion yourself. But if there is $1 million in a vault and there's 1 billion being transacted on that chain through one, that means that million has been recycled 1,000 times over a 24-hour period. I don't know if that makes sense to any of you, but it's basically we've used that $1 million 1,000 times. So we've been recycling it nonstop. As we're using it for credits, we're replenishing it with debits that are happening somewhere else.
It's like a closed system, so it never truly exits the system. It just kind of circulates throughout the system.
Exactly. Yeah. So which is why we need to have a product of feeding liquidity in it. And at some point, we will hit some form of holy grail moment where we will know at some point, we will know from an efficiency perspective how much liquidity we need per chain. But also there's other variables because not every chain is the same. You know, if you look at demand, you know, there's a bunch that have no volume and a bunch that have a lot.
Oh yeah. Well,
does that answer the question? That's a well-rounded answer, but
I believe that answers it and then some, in the good way.
So maybe the last thing I can say about it is there's a part of it, and I've talked about this in the past, there's a part of it from a chain expansion perspective that is about building relationships. And that relationship is built with the foundation of that chain. And, you know, there's opportunities to create like incentives and grants and all of those things. So you can imagine how valuable being part of this system could be for a chain. I'm not, you know, patting myself in the back, but if this happens to be what it happens to be, then having an anchor on your chain to make it part of the net, like could be a pretty important thing in terms of interoperability and growth. If you're not part of the system and people can't use like the assets that are on that chain in a form of payment, and people can't buy assets in real time and they still have to resolve to other means, well, you're a bit behind. So that could be a major problem for your ecosystem's growth and interoperability, and again in the context of payments.
Oh yeah, that's an exciting prospect one day where chain foundations might come to us.
Well, I mean, it seems like an obvious kind of natural path. If you
hmm
think about it.
And here's another question. This one is actually aimed at the both of us. I figure we'll do this one, and then we'll probably see if Ben has anything he wants to add at the end. So, what is it you, Jason and Dan, are looking forward to the most in the future of Embr, personally? Let's start with you, Jason.
No, go ahead. I'll take a break.
Yeah, sure.
I'll
All right.
think about my.
Sounds
I'll
good.
think about my
Yeah.
answer.
Honestly, for me, it's all about impact. I think it's kind of profound, the impact that this kind of thing could have. And it might sound like a cop out, but truly that's the thing I'm most excited about. It's the impact, just what this could do for everyone. I think, the vast majority of you in this room I've seen around for months, years. All of us have had to put up with the bullshit that it takes, pardon my French, to to just get a simple token, to get this token, Embr. It takes work. We didn't have checkout when we launched. Getting Embr at the start, although the pre-sale was pretty smooth, if I do say so myself. Everything else, like getting a token, it's tough. You have to know what you're doing, and there are a bajillion ways of making mistakes. I can't even tell you how many tickets I've received on the Embr customer support service where people just send like their BNB to a contract address instead of actually swapping for it on chain. Or maybe they messed up their wallet address and sent tokens into the ether or whatever. All these things are theoretically targeted by what we're doing, and that impact is profound. And I think if you really want to go deeper, the promise of cryptocurrency is providing an alternative to fiat currency that is at its core decentralized or trust minimized, or anywhere in between there is good. And right now you can't really use cryptocurrency in practical day-to-day situations because it's just not there's no incentive to do so over your US dollar in most instances. But with what we're doing here, it could be possible to say one day that like cryptocurrency as a whole could be far more practical for day-to-day transacting, day-to-day payments, whatever, sending money. It's profound, and the impact is what I'm most excited for. It's not any one specific thing like, oh, we got there, we've achieved impact. But from a broad level, that is truly what I'm most excited to see. The day where you could walk into a Starbucks shop, and use your phone, to pay in, I don't know, Dogecoin on Mars. The vendor gets to receive USDC or USDT, and everything settles in just a few seconds. It's like paying like with your Google Pay right now, like virtually not different. It's crazy to think that is a real possibility in the future without having to wait on all the pitfalls that come with currently right now. If you were to do something similar, it's possible, but there's still some drawbacks that are our API can cut through, or at least products that will be powered by our API. And I think the impact is what excites me the most, personally. Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna answer a short one because it's a boring one. For me, surprisingly, what really gets me excited, it's really about creating this new payment system. And this payment system, when you think about it, it's a pretty complicated thing. Requires a lot of how can I say, I mean, in the TradFi system, they've been trying to create this real-time payment rail that effectively solve cross-border payments for decades. Still not solved today because basically every single country has their own local rails that is effectively not really interoperable internationally. So everyone's solving their own little problem internally, but on the global stage, it's not really solved. So coming from a globally native kind of mindset, for me, I find it really, truly exciting. And, you know, I'm traveling all the time. So having this kind of global payment rail that is extremely inclusive because it does not require any banks to be part of it. You know, if we fully move on chain and people have their own, you know, own on-chain account that they can basically have on their phone wherever they are, and there's way more people that have phones than a bank account. And then if you think about decentralized ID, then, you know, people don't need to actually have an actual locally issued. So there's going to be all these inclusivity, but ultimately all these moving parts, even if they appear, but if the payment system is not there to easily and seamlessly and rapidly, you know, enable these exchange of value between people around the world, then yeah, it's not necessarily that useful. So I think what we're working on is extremely important. We have absolutely no idea how important it's going to turn out to be, but the vision is big and the ambition is bold. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Do you want to chime in, Ben?
Yeah, I just want to give it. It's perfect timing, really, because I had a little story today. I've been away for a few months, as you guys know, and I saw my mum for the first time in a few months. And we were driving along, and she was like, "Oh, you know, tell me about your crypto project. What's going on with it?" And I was trying to explain it to her, obviously going over her head. She's 72, but yeah, she was like saying, "Oh, we're going to spend all your millions on all," and it was very condescending. I was trying to explain to her that this isn't about the money. As much as money's great, we all love the money side. This isn't about the money for me. It's about building something that potentially can change the world, can stay the test of time. And again, I was in the Philippines literally last week, and everyone's using this thing called Gcash, and it's really big over there. And I'm sitting there like pissed off because why can't, and in the Philippines, crypto is really big, but no one's paying for anything out there with crypto. It's literally, it's a Gcash. It's a QR code. You go in, you scan, and you pay via your bank account. And I was with a lovely young lady, and I said, "So do you have crypto?" She goes, "Yeah, I've got a couple of grand in crypto." I'm like, imagine you can just go up to these vendors and just pay with your crypto, and go into McDonald's and pay with your crypto, or go onto any of these platforms and just pay with your crypto. It's just, what we're doing is we're changing everything in payments. You know, the big thing with Visa and MasterCard came out many years ago, and that was such a big game changer. And potentially where we want to take this is, yeah, you can go most countries in the world and you can use the assets in your wallet to buy things in the real world. That is such an incredible achievement from a project that started 2.5 years ago, and where it's going to go, and it potentially will go there. And the question was, what you're looking forward to most? I'm looking forward to when I retire, I can go into these places around the world and I see people using our payment system. That will be cool. And I just sitting there in McDonald's and someone's using our payment system to pay with crypto. And I'll be sitting there like, I was a part of that. I was part from the day one, and you guys in this room, all of us, we were a part of that. And that's what I'm looking forward to the most, that moment when I can see it out there in the real world and I see someone else using it. That would be cool.
Yeah, that's basically the same motivation for me as well. That impact, I think, is just so incredible. And I have a question for you, Ben. Let me pull it up here. This one is from Souljack. He says, "Shall we drop a nice little surprise for you this week? And when surprise? If it's not a good idea to do it here, don't worry about it. But I figured I would poke the bear a little bit here in case this is the time."
Oh no, this bear has been poked quite a lot recently this week by a lot of people in this. No more poking me, please. Tomorrow we will have an amazing, cool update over on the Telegram. Myself, Dan, obviously, is more than welcome to join. Jess is more than welcome to join. It's a thank you to you guys. We've worked quite hard on this, and we have built or designed something, just a little secret for you guys. And yeah, we genuinely think we have done something that no one else in the space has done. And I hope you guys enjoy it tomorrow. That's all I'm going to say.
Nice. I like it. And I think on that note, we have hit about the 1 hour mark. So I think that's a good place to wrap this up. So I would just like to thank every single person who attended today. Genuinely, we appreciate it. I think we're really liking these bi-weekly Q&As, and some juicy questions get asked and juicy answers get given. So keep coming back. We're going to keep doing these, and if anything changes, we'll be sure to alert people in advance. There will be a recording of this Q&A probably in a few minutes or so, if not maybe a couple of hours after. It might have to be some processing. It'll be an audio recording. I'll be sure to put it in the general chat, token discussion, and anywhere else that makes sense in the Telegram. But with that, thank you, and we look forward to doing this again. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Cheers.
Have a good one, guys.